First little corner, no loss of oil pressure, so that's a good sign. Hey everybody, how's it going? A lot of you have been asking, just how the heck is Project Beef doing? It has been, I don't know, maybe like a month and a half or almost 2 months maybe since I've actually made a video on this vehicle, just because we've been doing a lot with the 944, started doing some stuff with the Land Cruiser, and Project Beef, well, has just kind of been in the background. We've been doing break-in miles to it, etc., etc. So everyone's wondering, how is the engine doing during break-in? I'm very sad to say that the entire car is super dirty. From me driving it so freaking much, this thing has been an absolute beast so far, and I can't get enough of it. I have been doing so many drives with this car. I can't do enough miles. It's just been so much fun. It has done about another 1,000 miles since you saw it last on the channel, all problem-free miles. So she is now due for her second oil change since the engine rebuild. But we're not just doing an oil change today, folks. We are doing some track prep. Me and my restless freaking mind have been thinking up ideas for how to make Project Beef even more beefy, and we're gonna be implementing those changes today in this video. Making it more track-worthy, making it super beefy. Are you excited? Hit the like button if you are. Stay tuned. Let's get right into it. All right, let me give you just a little bit of an insight into what's going on inside my brain, and that will work into what the ding dang ding we're freaking doing. Now, as you can see, I've got the 911 on the lift behind me. I went ahead and drained the oil out of it. I actually did that last evening. It is now the next morning, just so we could get a very thorough drain. I also went ahead and took off the sump. As you can see, this is the oil sump that I have on my car. It is the FVD Brombacher Deep Sump Kit. See, FVD Brombacher. And it has the X51 oil baffle that comes with it. The FVD Brombacher kit allows for an additional 0.75 quarts of oil capacity, plus obviously the much better baffle to hold the oil near the pickup. And that's fine, honestly. I've done multiple track days with this sump and had no oil starvation issues. And while this is a great product, my understanding is once you start doing suspension mods and running better tires, then that oil sump does start to become a little bit insufficient, as in you could potentially starve the pickup even with that deep sump and baffle. Maybe a little bit of a tease as to what is coming for this car, but at the very least, I just spent a buttload of money rebuilding this engine, and I would like to do everything that I possibly can to be able to obviously make sure that it always has oil in the middle of high G corners, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what. Now, I know I did say in a previous video that I'm just gonna continue running the FVD Brombacher Deep Sump, and that is true, but we are going to make some minor modifications to it to make it better. Let me show you what I've got in mind. Okay, now on the table is my FVD Brombacher Deep Sump with its beautiful X51 baffle. Just for some comparison purposes, here is the stock sump and baffle, and as you can see, there is a huge difference and improvement with regards to the FVD Brombacher. Obviously, capacity increase, but this baffle, this stock baffle, is just totally insufficient compared to that. This thing seals off to the internal geometry of the sump super well, and you can see just based on these witness marks on these seals that it's obviously pushing off on them and doing a great job of preventing oil from sloshing around either side of this thing. Pretty freaking impressive. And again, as good of a product as this thing is, because it's only 0.75 additional liters, I think we can improve on this, and not just in the capacity sense. If you're familiar with the Ellen Engineering Deep Sump Kit, the 2-quart additional Deep Sump Kit, it comes with the X51 baffle, 2 quarts of additional oil capacity, and it has a plate that helps to block off all of the surrounding area around the baffle to essentially hold in any additional oil. The mentality there being, of course, here is your area that you're pulling oil from. If you raise this up and block off this entire area, so that you basically keep this whole thing filled and then use the baffle to hold oil down within that. Then instead of having the oil being pulled just from this area, you're pulling oil from this entire area, meaning that you have this much more volume to pull from. So you can see what I'm getting at. I have this expensive FED Brombacher kit that doesn't have that plate to hold that in. Maybe we make it. But in the meantime, I have also gone ahead and purchased the Ellen Engineering half quart additional kit, and that is this right here. So basically what that does is it goes around the perimeter to add that much more depth to the sump, giving it an additional half quart capacity. So no, we won't have the 2 quarts of additional capacity that the Ellen Engineering kit provides, at least the bigger Ellen Engineering kit, but we'll now have 1.25 additional quarts of capacity. And this sounds sketchy, but hear me out. I've started making my own baffle plate. Yes, that's right. Obviously, it's very not complete currently, but you can see where I'm going. So I'm gonna continue working away at perfecting this prototype. And I know it seems sketchy, but hear me out. It has a lot of potential to do a lot of good in protecting our very expensive Project Beef engine. All of this, of course, in the name of I had already purchased this FED Brombacher kit several years ago, and I didn't want to repurchase another $1,000 deep sump kit from another company. So I just went the route of purchasing this, which is only a few $100s. And in fact, I got a sweet deal on it, actually from Ellen Engineering. So I didn't actually pay that much. And I bought $30 worth of sheet metal, the rest of which is in the other room. So if we mess up, we can try again. I forget how much that FED Brombacher sump was. I'll flash it up on the screen. But in the end, we're going to be in this for much less than the actual cost of the 2 quart additional Ellen Engineering deep sump kit. So I'm gonna get to work. Let's see if we can actually make this plan happen. Okay, let me show you guys where I'm at. This is very much, like I said, in the prototype phase. But I don't think it's crazy. I'm literally emulating exactly what Ellen Engineering does for their kit. So as long as I can execute it properly, things should go well. But let me show you what I've just done. So of course, here we have our X51 baffle. And so here's what I've done. I've actually taken the baffle and I took some longer hardware and was able to like mount it roughly in the holes where it will be mounted. So the idea is going to be basically everything you see in black here is going to be cut so that we can remove that shape. So the order of things will be FED Brombacher, Ellen Engineering half quart additional sump kit, this, and then that will go down on top of it. Reason being, we need the exact amount of gap up to the inside of the sump in order for these seals to properly seal off to the inside geometry. So what we're changing is we're adding this and this, which means that we need to elevate that exactly by the thickness of this and this. Make sense? All right, cool. Okay, now the hard part comes. I need to attempt to cut all of this out, and that curve shape right there is gonna be a challenge. Honestly, not really sure how I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna have to get in there and see what happens. I hope I don't mar this thing up too badly.
Many minutes later.
Well, everyone, just consider me an expert fabricator. And by that, I mean I am an awful fabricator, but I was able to make actually a pretty convincing little oil baffle here. Let me show you what we got. All right, so here it is. Again, I'm still kind of making tweaks and changes, and I have not thrown on, of course, the half quart additional LN kit yet, but I threw this together just on the FED Brombacher sump just to kind of mock it all up. And, you know, it doesn't look half bad. Overall, I was able to pretty effectively make the cuts a way to be able to account for the different shapes. As you can see, it pretty much mimics the Ellen Engineering baffle almost exactly. Especially looking up along here, they have a similar amount of clearance along the side for oil to go down and in. Same on this side. I might have this dimension a little bit too big and hogged out, but also as you can see, there are rivets here on this baffle, which require a little bit of additional clearance. So of course that could result in, you know, some extra oil spilling out around this edge, but I still think the overall mentality of having that much more extra oil down in this area from which the pickup can draw from is going to be overall very beneficial in this situation. Again, going along with the mentality of just having that much more oil to draw from. And then the baffle is still going to be doing the same job it was doing previously of keeping oil in the center of that. So in a second here, I am going to get the LN kit out, the LN spacer out rather, and mock this up. We do need to put it on the bottom of the car just to make sure that everything does in fact go up in there nicely with everything stacked together. The other thing we need to do is having to do with the pickup here. Now you can see this is the setup that was on the car that I just took off. This is from the FED Brombacher kit, of course, the spacer that came with this to allow for the additional drop down of the sump. Well, the LN Engineering kit comes with yet another spacer to allow for the pickup to be dropped the distance of this. Unfortunately, however, the hardware that was holding this in just now, well, is now going to be too short because we now have yet another spacer. Before, there was about actually like a ½ inch almost of thread depth going into the actual case half of the engine. So I'd like to maintain that, and considering this is the oil pickup, I don't want to risk whatsoever having this ever come loose, so I've come up with a solution. I found these 2 bolts in my spare hardware bin, and these are actually Porsche bolts. These are old coil pack bolts that I actually just kept from the last time I swapped out coil packs on an engine, and they are the exact thread and the exact diameter, and they are much longer. However, they are a little bit too long, so I took my grinder and ground them down about 1/10 of an inch, and they are now the perfect length that we need to account for this new additional spacer. So we've got the pickup hardware situation solved. The last thing we need to consider is the spacing or setting up of the actual baffle. And we're gonna do that by utilizing the washers that came with the LN Engineering kit. Unfortunately, they didn't come up with enough washers, so I can stack 2 of these at a time, and they're the exact height that we need to space this up, but again, I only have enough for 2 of the 3 bolts. So I was able to come up with an assortment of washers from my own, spare hardware collection and come up with the exact depth that we needed. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 spacers to be able to bring this up. So aside from the washers, literally all of the fasteners that we're using here to kind of help out with our custom fab situation are still Porsche bolts. You mad about it? I'm not. So that's a lot of words, but let's go ahead, take this baffle back off, take that LN Engineering spacer out, and try to put it all together for the first time and just do a little test fitment, shall we? Guys, I'm getting kind of excited. I just did more finessing on this thing than freaking Young Gravy. Anyway, let me show you where we're at. I've got the mock-up of the whole kit and caboodle right here. Here is the total setup. Half-quart LN Engineering spacer there, FED Brombacher, and then my custom fabbed little unit here that is tightened down by the X51 baffle. Let's go over to the car and I can show you guys what's happening underneath. Here are the other 2 fasteners that I was just referring to, obviously. These are the ones that were from the coil packs that I had sitting around that I had to shorten up a little bit, but they're working swimmingly. You can see up in there our new spacer on top, and then our FED Brombacher one in the middle, and then the original pickup right there. So that's all assembled and put together and torqued down. Put that to 12 Newton meters. That should be more than sufficient. Plus the fact that these bolts have washers kind of built into the head of them. Those things should not be going anywhere. I went ahead and got this flange really nice and cleaned up with a carbide blade, plus took several rounds of brake clean, just getting anything off of here that could be oily. For the most part, that flange is basically ready to go. So, game plan. I'm ready to put this thing up in the car. Weirdly enough, as nicely machined as that LN Engineering spacer is, I had to make some modifications to it. But there were 2 holes, this one and this one, that I had to hog out with a die grinder. Those were just shifted over just enough to where they weren't like concentric with the FED Brombacher sump. Kind of weird. So I don't know who's in the wrong there, whether it's FED Brombacher or whether it's LN Engineering, but either way, the FED Brombacher one has fit up to the car before, so obviously those holes aren't super far off, I know that. Nonetheless, it was an easy fix. It was like 2 minutes with a die grinder and we've got alignment. Game plan. As you can see, this is all basically put together and ready to go, so what I'm gonna do is take this all back off, and we are going to get some Loctite on these bolts right here, and then I'm going to put Loctite 5900 on either side of the spacer. I'm not gonna do it on this flange, and I'm not going to do it on the bottom of the plate. Reason being, this Ellen Engineering spacer has the least amount of surface area. Let's see if you can see under there. You can kind of see the edge of the FVD Braunbach one poking out there. It's kind of dark up in there, but this has the least amount of surface area. So I don't want to go smudging a bunch of Loctite 5900 that's exposed and not going to be, you know, used to mate up with anything, and then have that eventually get sucked up in my pickup. Obviously, I want to minimize the amount of RTV in that engine as much as possible. We don't want to have a Subaru situation happening. Additionally, I will show you guys the correct technique to apply RTV to a flange. We've talked about it before, but you know, it's always good to go over it. You don't glob it onto the flange. That ends up putting way too much on the flange. We'll talk about it in just a second here. So we're gonna have to do a lot of RTV surfaces in a short amount of time. We're going to have this RTV'd up in advance. Fortunately, Loctite 5900 does have a decent amount of working time. It doesn't set up in like 2 minutes. I think we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes of realistic working time before it really starts to set up on us. Okay, I hope you guys can see this okay. I've got everything taken back apart, as you can see. So here's how to apply this stuff. Take a little bit on your finger and then just dab it like this and work it around. What's gonna be really tricky is putting it on the other side and not getting my table absolutely coated. Holy cow, I am absolutely covered in RTV. So I just went over and put RTV on the car, and it's now time to begin assembly of this for the last time. Tricky part is aligning these guys, and now that I got freaking RTV on them, they keep wanting to stick to my hand, so that's dope. 10, 12 minutes in of this RTV, so I'm running out of time quickly, to be honest. I just went ahead and threw some red Loctite on the bolts for the X51 oil baffle, and now we can set this, at least for the last time, hopefully. Get some gloves on, because no doubt I'm going to need them. So I'm going to leave these baffle bolts loose for just a second. As you can see, I'm just turning them in a couple turns just to make sure they're in there. But what I'm going to do is slam a bunch of these bolts down in. These are the old bolts, just to make sure that everything is in alignment. Once I have proven that it's all in alignment, which it appears to be, now we can go ahead and tighten down our baffle for the last time. And I'm going to go ahead and torque it down. I think I'll do 12 Newton meters on these bad boys, or 13.9. We can run over and install it in the car, assuming we can keep everything aligned on the way over there. Alrighty. Alrighty, everybody. Well, as you saw, we just got it up in place. And yes, it did take quite a bit of wrestling, because even though I went ahead and aligned everything over on that table just so, by the time I got it over here, by the time I got everything aligned, this plate inevitably came out of alignment just slightly. Nonetheless, we got it. We got it. Everything is up there, torqued down to 12 Newton meters. So now I'm just going to let it set up and cure the RTV. Once that gets set up, then tomorrow we can just go ahead and add oil and then take this thing on its maiden voyage. All right, well, now we wait. Well, all right, everyone, the time has officially come. Am I nervous? Yes, sort of. This is either going to go well or it's not going to go well. In what ways couldn't it go well? Well, my homemade baffle could either not work whatsoever and cause oil starvation. That wouldn't be great. Or we could be leaking like an absolute sieve, because instead of having one mating surface at the sump, we now have 3. And in my past experience with these engines, it is so easy to have that surface leak. This is very much just a prototype thing though. So it is time to add oil though, and you know we're going back in with none other than the best, Redline. I am putting in the oil that I always run in this car when I'm running it on the street, and that is Redline's 5W 50 weight oil. This oil is fantastic. It has a lot more of additives like molybdenum and ZDDP. Everyone always says to run Mobil 1 in these engines because there's a sticker right there for it. I'm calling them out. Their oil is not nearly as good as this, I can guarantee it, especially with regards to additives. This is basically racing oil for the street, except it does have all the detergents and everything that racing oil doesn't have, so that you can then run it in your engine for many thousands of miles very reliably. Go check out their website. They have literally every kind of fluid that you can imagine for a car, from oils to ATFs to gear oils for diffs and transmissions, to brake fluid, to power steering fluid, you name it, they've got it. Their coolants are also fantastic as well. We just finished putting the super cool coolant in the Land Cruiser after we did the timing belt and water pump on that vehicle. So that thing is now running tip top, of course, and staying very cool. Super cool, one might say. So go check them out. And for a limited time, I'm going to include a free Redline t-shirt in 3 random orders if you order a t-shirt off of funaheadtv.com. But do it soon, because that deal is not going to last long. If I'm doing my math correctly there, I would say that is a 2-for-1 t-shirt deal. Can't pass up on that. Enough talking, let's go ahead and get to filling. Well, as you can see, the key is in hand. I just put 10 quarts in this thing and it is now showing a good level on the dipstick. Of course, after the first start, we are going to have to go back and correct that because inevitably it will have sucked up oil throughout the filter housing and the cylinder heads and etc. So we'll have to confirm that, but it is holding oil. And I just checked a second ago, there are no leaks around the sump yet. Hopefully it stays that way. All right, well, we have oil pressure. Okay, well, I'm just gonna let it run for a second here, let the oil get up and throughout the engine. We'll go recheck the level and then top it up as needed. But the big question here is going to be, how's it gonna drive? And once everything heats up, of course, you got thermal expansion with that sump plate. I think there will be a little bit of bowing. I checked it with my MAP gas torch. I did a little bit experiment earlier and got that thing red hot. And of course, you know, they'll bow a little bit and move. But I'm just really crossing my fingers that it doesn't bow and move that much, because that could do bad things for our oil pressure. Nothing like making a homemade oil baffle for your super expensive Porsche engine, you know what I mean? Okay, but in all honesty, I feel like things are going well, but the drive is in fact going to be the big question mark, and it's one that I'm pretty nervous about. But got some good corners along a route that I've planned to nicely check and make sure that hopefully we can maintain good oil pressure under high G conditions in Mexico. All right, well, here we are just cruising along. I've done maybe a couple miles already. So far so good, but you know, obviously we haven't pushed it. The coolant is up to temperature, oil is not. We are driving towards some curvy roads in Mexico, of course. We'll be able to put this car into some level of sustained corners to be able to truly check and make sure that our sump is going to work. I'm gonna kind of ease into it, starting with some smaller corners, and then we'll work our way up into a 270-degree on-ramp. That'll be the final boss, the final check to make sure that things are working as they should. Yes, I'm nervous. Yes, I'm nervous. Okay, first little corner, no loss of oil pressure. No loss there. Gosh, this freaking engine just has so much freaking torque. It is fantastic. All right, all good there as well. Stayed strong there, but that's a short corner, so. Okay, well, we've done all of the progressively increasing corners that I had planned along this Mexico route. Let's go to the 270-degree on-ramp and see how she does. And that'll be several minutes from now, so the oil should be quite a bit hotter and more up to operating temp. So let's get it, as the kids say. Well, good news, everyone. Well, good and bad news, actually. Bad news is I'm a cosmic dunce toboggan, and I forgot to fire up the camera while I was just doing the 270-degree on-ramp. Was that the entire pinnacle of this freaking video? Yup! But the good news is, it didn't lose a single PSI of oil pressure. I was pushing it hard and I was watching that gauge the entire time and it didn't drop at all. And even with the FED Brombacher deep sump, it would do a little bit of fluctuation on that same on-ramp. I know this because I used to take that on-ramp to work every single day. The amount of times I've had this exact car on that on-ramp is hundreds. I know the behavior of that thing. Because it's a 270-degree on-ramp, it's a sustained corner, and when you're pushing it, all of that oil is sloshed over for a long time. And I'm used to seeing little tiny dips on the oil pressure gauge while in the middle of that corner. Of course, it's not enough to lose oil pressure completely, right? It's not going to zero. It's like dipping by like half a bar. But nonetheless, it used to dip. And now it didn't move. It was like locked in. And I am freaking psyched that at least for the initial test drive, my little prototype oil baffle plus the addition of the Ellen Engineering deep sump was a success. I am psyched, you guys. Now all we have to do is safely get this thing back to the Fun Ahead headquarters where we can wrap this video up. So, me, take it away. Well, everybody, the P-Car is back up in the air, as you can see, and we just got back from our very first successful drive with our new deep sump. I've got it up in the air just checking for oil leaks, and check this out. Miraculously, we have none, at least so far. I think we've got to let it sit for a while before we do the full entire analysis, meaning it's probably got to sit for a day or two before a leak would actually begin to show itself. But we just did a 40-mile drive where the oil was fully up to temp. Nothing's leaking yet. Amazing. Crossing our fingers that it stays that way. Well, you guys, sketchy or not, that worked, and I could not be more thrilled. Honestly, this was kind of the last remaining puzzle piece of Project Beef. We did everything inside this engine to make it as freaking beefy as possible. We had an improved oil sump and baffle situation over stock, but it wasn't quite where I wanted it. I knew it could be better, and considering we did nothing but the best for this entire engine, I wanted it to be the best. And I think we have certainly achieved that, especially considering we just did the 270-degree on-ramp check and it didn't lose a single pound of oil pressure. I am thrilled. Call it sketchy, call it what you will, but it works. So that means at the end of the day, Project Beef is that much beefier. She's ready for her first track weekend, boys and girls. All we have to do now is do a few more break-in miles to where I'm really actually comfortable with it and vet this sump out a little bit more, continue to drive it, watch the oil pressure. But honestly, if that first 40 miles was an indication of anything, I think we're fully golden. Knock on wood. So, if you enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It helps out my channel immensely. And also please subscribe if you want to see even more stuff like this in the near future. We've always got stuff coming down the pipeline with Project Beef and track day very soon. So, thank you all so much for being here today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Yes, you, I'm looking right at you, and I'll see you all hopefully in the next episode. See ya. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see even more great Fun Ahead TV content, please click the link right here. I'll see you over there.